Hey guys, Nate Schomer, Certified Master Dog Trainer, and today I'm going to be answering some of your dog training questions. If you go to the description below, you can find your question and jump to that portion of the video. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, first question. My puppy outside of training is not coming when called. During training with treats, he comes when I call him every time. However, when he is in our yard off leash, he will often not come when I call him. He will just sit down and look at me. I've been working the recall commands, sit and down, and he seems to perform them fine when I use treats. Okay, so when we are giving our dog commands, we have to keep in mind that we should be teaching our dogs formal commands and informal commands. If we're using a formal command would be something like sit, down, come, heel. Those are very formal, and every time we give our dog those commands, we expect them to perform the behavior. An informal command is something more like this. Hey, let's go guys, come on, let's go, come on, yay, good puppies. That's very informal. That's trying to get our dogs to come to us without giving them a formal command. If you are going to use a formal command, whether it's in training or out of training, you have to make sure that you can reinforce the behavior every single time you give your dog that command. So if it was my puppy that I'm training and I'm starting to realize if I call him when he's in the yard, not during a training routine, my puppy's not listening, well then I'm not going to continue to try to call him, because then my puppy's going to learn every time I'm in the yard and he calls my name, I don't have to listen to him. So what I would do is I'd maybe play with the puppy, get the puppy to come to me while engaging with him, having a good time. Then I'm going to hook a long line to my puppy and I'm going to let my puppy go back to exploring the yard. Once my puppy is not paying attention and they're kind of in a different zone, then I'm going to call my puppy to me and I'm going to reinforce the behavior by using the long line. This is going to give me an opportunity to show my puppy it doesn't matter what's going on, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If I give you a come when called command, you need to come the moment that I call you. Look at it this way. Anytime we want our puppy or our dogs to perform a behavior in a certain environment, we have to rehearse that with our dog or our puppy. We can't expect them to do it perfectly without practicing it. If you think about theater, people who perform on stage, the first time you go to watch them perform, that's not their first time performing that routine or that play or that stand-up comedy show, whatever it is. They've rehearsed it over and over and over and over again to make sure that they're able to do it perfectly when the day comes and they're on stage. Look at that the same way as when you're training your puppy or your dog. You have to rehearse every situation. If there's a certain situation you would like your puppy or your dog to act a very specific way, then you need to rehearse it over and over again, so when the real situation takes place, your puppy or your dog knows exactly what to do. Another part of that question was the training treats. In the very beginning, when we're training a dog, we're using continual reinforcement. We are rewarding every single behavior. Every time our dog does a behavior, we mark, we reward. I start to space out the rewards once my dog is starting to perform the behaviors on the verbal command alone. So I say down, my dog lays down without having to point to the ground. I say sit, my dog sits without having to lift up on the food. I say come, my dog comes to me without having to cue my dog with that physical cue. Once I get my dog to perform all the behaviors on the verbal command alone, then I start spacing out the rewards. So in the very beginning, it's sit, yes, reward, down, yes, reward, come, yes, reward, heel, yes, reward. Then it's going to turn into sit, yes, reward, down, good, nice job, come, very good, excellent, heel, good girl or good boy, down, yes, reward. Then eventually it's going to turn into sit, down, good, nice job, come, excellent, heel, down, sit, yes, reward. So I'm starting to space out the rewards. In the beginning, we're going to be giving our dogs verbal feedback, but we're not going to reward on every single one. And then eventually it can turn into sit, down, come, heel, spin, roll over, play dead. Yes, reward. Remember, our dogs are always doing things based on motivation. They're either motivated to access something pleasant or they're motivated to prevent something unpleasant. We determine what motivating factors are going to influence our dog's behavior. So your dog has to believe that there's a possibility that they're going to receive a reward, or they have to believe there's a possibility that if they don't do the behavior, they may receive a correction. As long as your dog or your puppy believes that, then they will perform the behaviors that you're asking them to perform. And this comes with training and a lot of repetition. So that's how we're going to start spacing out the rewards. Definitely check out my video that I have on this subject. I explain it a little bit better there. So let's move on to the next question. I just brought my 4-month-old puppy in for his booster shots and checkup at the veterinarian, and she told me that my puppy was very difficult to restrain and that he did not like being held down for blood work, etc. She said that he might need some training, which surprised me since I've been working with him every day. Should one expect a puppy that old not to complain when being restrained? This is going to depend a lot on the individual puppy. Some dogs are going to be more willing, or some puppies are going to be more willing to just sit down and relax. It depends on the breed and it depends on the individual. So for example, my dog Ari, when she was a young puppy, she did not like being held. She did not like being restrained. She would squirm, she would wiggle, and she's a great dog. She grew up into an excellent dog. When I'm doing obedience with a puppy, I've talked about this in a lot of my other videos, I make it fun. I try to make it engaging. I want the puppy to enjoy it as much as possible. I'm getting them to perform the behaviors in their mind. They're doing the positions to jump up and access a reward or to play with a toy. So it becomes something that they enjoy quite a bit. Now, you're not going to have reliability or full reliability when training a puppy, especially in the early stages. If you're not using any form of positive punishment, you will never have 100% reliability within your obedience. And I don't recommend correcting puppies for obedience training. We have to keep in mind we have obedience issues and we have behavioral issues. An obedience issue is the dog doesn't sit when I ask him to sit. The dog doesn't down when I ask him to down. The dog doesn't come to me when I give the dog the come when called command. These are obedience issues. But then we have behavioral issues. A behavioral issue is the dog digs. The dog chews up furniture. The dog is drinking out of the toilet bowl. The dog is chasing squirrels, rabbits, and cars. These are all behavioral issues. These are things that we do not want the dog to perform at all. An obedience issue is only bad because the dog is not listening to us. The act of not sitting when the dog is laying down is not a bad behavior. It's only bad because we want him to sit when he's laying down and he's choosing not to listen. So this is the difference between obedience and behavioral issues. When I'm working with a puppy, I will correct them when they're a puppy using a physical correction to stop behavioral issues. No, you may not chase cars. Give the dog a correction or give the puppy a correction. This is important because it's for the safety of the puppy. I don't want the puppy running into the street and getting hit by a car if somebody accidentally leaves the front door open. So I'm going to make sure the puppy knows that going towards the street is not okay. Chasing cars is not okay. And I will give them a physical correction to stop that behavior. Now, we never want to use a physical correction to stop a behavior that is based on fear. If you have a dog or a puppy that is doing a behavior based on fear, the best choice is to use counter conditioning as well as desensitizing the dog to whatever it is that they are afraid of. If you try to use a physical correction to stop a behavior that is based on fear, you will only make that fear worse. For example, let's say you have your dog in a downstay and your dog is terrified of fireworks. And your dog breaks the downstay because somebody starts shooting off fireworks. You're not going to want to correct your dog for breaking that downstay because in the dog's mind, he's not or she's not breaking the downstay, but rather escaping the fireworks. And if you correct them for breaking the downstay because they're afraid of the fireworks and they're trying to get away, the dog is going to associate the correction with the fireworks, and the fear for the fireworks is going to become much greater. Because the dog's trying to escape it, they're afraid, correction, fireworks are bad, this is terrible, and now they're even more afraid. So make sure if you are going to use a correction to stop a behavioral issue that a puppy is performing, it cannot be a behavior that is based on fear. This is incredibly important. But again, if it's something like chasing cars, you do want to correct that because you don't want your puppy to run into the street. If your puppy is constantly getting into the trash can, I correct that as well. I don't want the puppy to get something out of the trash can that is dangerous that the puppy ends up eating and it causes a ruptured bowel or a blockage or something like that that could be very, very dangerous to the puppy. So this is okay to correct a dog during that portion in the dog's life if it's for behavioral issues that are potentially life-threatening. Obedience, I'm not going to correct them when they're a puppy. So they're not going to have the perfect sit stay. They're not going to have the best down stay. They're not going to be perfect at their obedience because there's no consequence if they don't do it. My puppy is definitely food driven when it comes to training. However, he does like to play tug with me. How do I transition him from food rewards to playing tug as a reward? This is a great question. I like to use toys when I train any dog, but I want to make sure that I can get the dog to first do the behavior. It's very difficult to teach a dog new behaviors using a toy. We first teach the behaviors using either luring or leash pressure. And it should actually be called leash cue because we're using the leash to cue the dog into a specific behavior we would like them to perform. Once I have a dog that I'm working with performing all the behaviors on the verbal command alone, then I will start to reinforce the behaviors using a toy. If you're going to use a toy, you have to make sure anytime you mark a behavior and you're going to reward with a toy, you need to use your terminal marker. So if I told my dog to lay down, I wanted to reward my dog with a ball on the rope. When I use the terminal marker, my dog can jump up and we can play with the ball on the rope and we can have a good time. I wouldn't want to use my continuation marker and then try to reward the dog with a toy because they're supposed to stay in that position, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain the down stay at the same time playing with the toy. So once you have your dog doing all the commands on the verbal alone, so you can say sit, boom, your dog sits. Down, boom, your dog lays down. Then you can go ahead and you can start, instead of pulling out a treat, you can pull out a toy, you can play tug, and then you can tell your dog to out and go right back into the training. So you want to make sure that your dog understands how to play with a toy, and you also want to make sure that you can get your dog to release the toy when you tell them to drop it or out. I use the word out, so I tell my dog out, and then we go right back into training. So you have to have that control in order to use the toy during your obedience routine. How do you teach a puppy not to jump on the couch? It's supposed to be a safe place for my older dog, but now the puppy jumps there too. If I want to prevent a puppy from going on a certain specific piece of furniture, I'm going to treat it and I'm going to train the exercise the exact same way I teach a stay. So I'm going to make sure the puppy understands leash pressure. I want to make sure the puppy knows their markers, so continuation marker, terminal marker, and condition correction. So that would be our no, or our sound that predicts either negative reinforcement or positive punishment. When they're a puppy, my no always predicts negative reinforcement, which is leash pressure. I'm showing the dog what they need to do. I'm showing the puppy what they need to do when I say no. So if I'm training a dog to do a climb stay, the moment the dog steps off the climb, when their paw touches the ground, I say one no, pinpointing the incorrect behavior. I calmly walk over to the dog, I grab the leash, I guide them back on the platform. Good dog. If my dog goes to jump on the couch, I don't want my dog to jump on the couch. I'm gonna say one no. The moment my dog jumps on the couch, I'm gonna walk over, grab the leash, and I'm gonna use the leash pressure to take the dog off of the couch. And I'm going to do that every single time my dog jumps on the couch, or my puppy that I'm training. The puppy jumps up, no. I walk over, I use the leash, so you're going to have a leash on your dog, or you can have a tab. A tab is just a much shorter leash that you can have on your dog when they're in the house, so you can still use that leash pressure without worrying about the leash getting caught on the furniture. So the puppy jumps up, again, you say one no, you casually walk over, you pull the puppy off of the couch. Once the puppy's off the couch, good puppy. You don't want to reward your puppy when you pull them off the couch. If you do, then your puppy might intentionally jump on the couch, so you pull them off the couch and you give them a treat. Oh, I jump on the couch, they pull me off the couch, I get a treat. I jump on the couch, they pull me off the couch, I get a treat. So if I'm having to reinforce a stay, or I'm trying to prevent a dog from jumping up on a specific piece of furniture or jumping up on people, this works for that as well. When they jump up, no, I use the leash pressure, I place them where I want them to be, then I say, good dog or good puppy, nice job. I do not give them an actual reward once I take them off of the couch, because again, they will seek out that behavior to get the reward. My dog is so nosy when people come over. If it's someone he doesn't recognize, he will start to bark and want to jump at them. Any suggestions on how to fix that? First, I want to show the dog what they need to do when somebody rings a doorbell or somebody knocks on the door. I have to go through the training first. So I'm going to have a friend or somebody else in the house knock on the door. Once they knock on the door, I'm going to cue the dog onto their climb command. I like to direct my dog to a climb command when somebody rings the doorbell or somebody knocks on the door. It's very simple to teach, and it's an easy way to reinforce a commanded behavior when somebody comes over to the house. So again, somebody knocks, I cue the dog onto the climb. Somebody rings the doorbell, I cue the dog onto the climb. Somebody rings the doorbell, I cue the dog onto the climb. I do this over and over again until somebody rings the doorbell. Look, my dog went over to their climb bed. Somebody knocks on the door. Look, my dog went over to the climb bed. I'm going to rehearse what I would like my dog to perform in that specific situation. Then, if you have a dog that's nosy and is trying to see who's at the door, simply place the climb in a position where the dog cannot see who is ever at the door. If you're unable to do that, then what I would do is I would correct my dog for barking or lunging at the person who's coming over. I would say that's not an okay behavior. If you do it, there will be a consequence. I don't want my dog to lunge at somebody, because if they keep doing that and the human responds the way most humans would, they'd be like, oh my gosh, this dog's jumping at me. And the dog sees that and the dog goes, ooh, look what I did. Eventually that can turn into your dog biting somebody when they come over. And that is something you most definitely do not want. So what I would do is I would have a leash on the dog. I would have a training collar on the dog. I would wait till the dog barked or lunged. I would say no, and then I would give the dog a leash pop. So what a leash pop is, it's basically taking a leash and then we're doing a snapping motion that activates the dog's training collar and it gives them a correction. And if the dog continues to do the behavior, then that means your correction is not high enough and you have to correct a little higher. Again, this is important. We don't want to correct our dogs. Nobody gets a dog because we want to correct them. But we also don't want our dog to bite the neighbor's kid when they come over. So we have to correct that behavior out of the dog's repertoire. So again, I wait till the dog barks or lunges. The moment they do it, no, I pop the leash, giving the dog a correction. The moment they stop doing that behavior, I go, yay, good dog, excellent job. And I do it enough times to where the dog no longer thinks of doing that bad behavior. If I tell my dog a command and he doesn't comply, I correct him, then he will comply. Should I then reward the dog or just go on to the next command? When I first start correcting a dog, this is the process. Let's say I tell my dog to sit and my dog chooses not to sit. I say one no to pinpoint the mistake. I pop the leash upwards, giving the dog a correction. Then I recommand the sit, and then I help the dog perform the sit by using the leash pressure. Once a dog sits, I reward him for that behavior. That's going to be in the early stages. But once I know my dog really understands the training, we've been doing it for a long time, and there's really not many mistakes taking place anymore, and my dog chooses not to do it, I'll give them a correction, I'll make sure they do the behavior, and then I can move on to the next one, and the dog's not going to get a reward. So in the beginning, yes, I will reward them, but after they've been training with me for a while, it's, let's say, 6 months into training, then they're not going to get a reward after they receive the correction. I'll go on to the next command or the next exercise. How do you train a dog to have a more reliable recall even when the dog is busy doing something else? If I want my dog to have a very reliable recall, I want to make sure every time I call them, no matter what's going on, no matter what distractions or situation we're in, I reinforce the command. If I need to use a leash, then I use a leash. So I take my dog to the park, I call my dog to me, I use the leash. I take my dog outside of a dog park where there are a lot of distractions, I call my dog to me, I use the leash to reinforce it. I take my dog anywhere, you name it. We take the dog to multiple different locations, we reinforce the command, and we do it over and over again to the point where our dog doesn't even think about not listening to us. We say the command, boom, the dog comes running over. I talked about this in one of my other videos. From my experience, it takes approximately 6 to 9 months for a dog to truly develop a very strong habit. And what I mean by that is, they don't even think about it. They just do the behavior. For example, if I'm working a dog outside and my dog Ari is inside, if she hears me giving that dog commands, she will perform those behaviors inside even when I'm not next to her. So I tell the dog outside to down, my dog downs inside the house. I tell the dog outside to sit, my dog Ari will sit inside the house. She'll still do the commands even though I'm not directly telling her to do it, because I trained her so much that when she hears a command, she just does it. But again, from my experience, it takes about 6 to 9 months of consistent training them every day, making sure that every time you give them a command, you follow through. And that's going to be the most important part. Don't give your dog a command if you're not ready to reinforce it. How much and how often do you feed your dogs daily? And for puppies, how much should we feed them? My 2 dogs, Ari and Charlie, I feed them twice a day. I feed them roughly 10 to 12 ounces of raw food in the morning and 10 to 12 ounces of raw food in the evening. They're not that big for their breed. So Ari is a Malinois and she's a very small Malinois. Charlie is a Lab and he's a very small Lab. It's going to depend on your dog. It's going to depend on your dog's activity level. And when I'm training or I'm raising a puppy, I'm not worried about how much they're eating. If I'm training them and they keep taking the food, I keep feeding them. A puppy usually is growing so fast that you're not worried about them getting fat. When I was training Harley, Harley was eating roughly 6 cups a day. That's because she's growing. Now, when she becomes an adult, when she's over a year, her metabolism is going to slow down and the food is going to have to be reduced. She's not going to continue eating 6 cups a day. If you want to make sure you're feeding your dog the right amount of food, weigh it. Then, if your dog starts to gain too much weight, just reduce how much you're feeding them. If they start to lose too much weight, give them some more food. But if you want to know more about nutrition, canine nutrition, I would definitely recommend checking out the documentary Pet Fooled, and then check out Dr. Karen Becker. She is really excellent when it comes to canine nutrition. She is my go-to when I need to learn more about canine nutrition, so definitely check her out. My 14-week-old puppy has started barking at people when they come in our yard. I also take him to my mechanical workshop and he starts barking at people while he's in his crate. I'm not always able to redirect him when he's in his crate. Is it best to wait until he's not barking, then mark and reward, or try and have him close to me and feed him and distract him before people walk in? This really depends on how the dog is barking. if I have a dog and that dog's in the yard and somebody walks into the yard and the dog starts to bark at that person and their hackles go up and they're backing up as they bark, then that dog is doing it out of fear. It's not out of protection, it's out of fear. If the dog runs at him barking and you can tell that the dog wants to bite him, now the dog is being either protective or aggressive, and it's not based on fear. If the dog is barking because it's fun to bark and they're playful and they're like, hi, how are you? And they're running over barking to say hi. So those are going to be the three main ways that a dog is going to be barking at somebody when they come in the yard. If it's the first one, if it's the dog is afraid and you want to teach the dog not to bark at people, this is how I fix that problem. Remember, if their hackles go up and they're barking and they're backing away, that's usually a clear indication that they're afraid and they're hoping that their barking is going to get the person to go away. So we know that the dog wants to get the person to go away. So if I'm working with a dog and I want them to stop barking at people when they come in, I walk into the yard, the dog starts to bark at me. As long as the dog is barking at me, I'm going to walk towards the dog. As long as they keep barking, I keep walking towards them. Now, I don't want to walk so fast that I corner the dog, because then I risk getting bit by the dog because the dog is afraid. So I'm going to walk towards them very slowly as they bark. The moment they stop barking, I turn and walk the other way. If they start to bark again, I walk towards them. If they stop barking, I walk away. If they bark again, I walk towards them. I'm showing them that if you bark, I'm going to walk towards you. And if you stop barking, I will go away. So I'm showing the dog how to do what I would like them to do in order to get what they want. So this is very important. So, and it's fast too. So I'm walking towards them, bark, 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 quiet, I turn away. They bark, I turn back. They're quiet, I turn away. And it has to be that fast. They'll quickly realize that they shouldn't be barking at you. Now, if it's the aggressive one, and I don't want the dog to be aggressive, this is when I would use a correction. Same with the playful one. If it's the playful, the dog's running at being playful, and I don't want my dog running or barking, I'm gonna tell them no as well. No, and then I'm gonna correct them. This is not going to make them not like people. It's just gonna be enough of a correction to let them know, I don't want you running and barking at everybody who comes over. So again, if it's based on fear, do the option that I spoke about, walk towards them. When they stop barking, you walk away. If it is the actual aggression, I'm going to tell the dog, no, that's not okay. That's not something you can do. You're going to receive a correction for that. Same if the dog is doing it, even if I don't want them to do it, but it's not aggression. They're just barking because they want to bark at somebody. I can correct that out of the dog's repertoire as well. That's how we're going to stop those behaviors. Now, when the dog is in the crate and the dog's barking, very simple way to fix that. So you guys have probably heard of the technique of shaking a jar of coins to stop a dog from doing a behavior. It's a loud noise, it's not pleasant, and the idea is the dog does the bad behavior, I shake the coins, they don't like it, they stop that behavior. Now again, that's not going to work on every dog. It depends on the dog's motivation levels. But what I usually do when it comes to a dog being loud in a crate, I take a metal bowl, I place it on top of the crate. If the dog barks, I go no, I walk over, I tap the top of the crate with the metal bowl. I walk away. If the dog barks or whines again, I say one no, I calmly walk over to the crate, I grab the bowl, I tap the top of the crate, and I walk away. This will work on most dogs. If that doesn't work, then that means that the dog is more motivated to bark at people when they come over than they are to prevent the top of the crate being hit. And this becomes very difficult because it's hard to correct them when they're inside of the crate. And if you're waiting for them to stop barking, yes, you can reward them, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stop barking, because again, that's a self-reinforcing behavior, or it could be in this specific situation. So then I would want to take the dog out of the situation, continue working with them, continue building my communication channels, building that relationship so the dog knows that when I give them a marker, whether it's a continuation marker, terminal marker, or their condition correction, the no sound, that they know how to properly respond after I give them that sound, and they can change their behavior accordingly. So then you just have to go back and you have to do more training with your dog. You can't have your dog next to you as well. If they see somebody, then you can say no, and you will be able to correct them. So then you're showing them in that situation, even though they're not inside the crate, you can reinforce what it is you would like them to perform. And then if they choose to stay quiet, you want to make sure you reward that. So if you correct your dog because your dog barked at somebody and then they're quiet, we want to reward them. But if somebody walks in and your dog thinks about barking and goes, ooh, I better not bark, that's a bad idea, and they look at you, go, yes, good job, and then you reward them. So that's going to be one of the easiest ways to fix that situation. We are learning to do the run, walk, run method of running. I do 1 minute run and 30-second walk. My problem is when we do an out and back run, on the way out, they drag behind me. Then on the way back, they will run beside me. Why? All I can figure is that they're thinking, woohoo, we get to go back home and I want to get there fast. How can I get them to run beside me the whole time? This is basically loose leash walking. It doesn't matter what speed you're going, it's a loose leash. We want the dog to be able to stay next to us, whether we're running or we're walking. So when I'm teaching loose leash walking, I'm constantly changing my pace and the dog has to focus on me. If my dog, look at it this way, this is the easiest way to get a dog to understand that position. If they go to my left, I jump to the right. If they don't stay next to me, they're gonna receive a correction from the leash when I jump to the right. If the dog goes ahead of me, I go backwards. If the dog goes behind me, I go forward, giving them a correction. Once they get back into the position, then I praise and reward them. So I'm not worried about why is my dog lagging or why is my dog running in front of me, unless it's a health concern. If my dog is maybe limping, then I'm gonna be concerned why they're behind me, and I'm gonna make sure that I take them to the vet and nothing's wrong with them. But if there's nothing physically wrong with the dog, then I'm going to correct them if they're lagging behind me. I'm going to say, no, it's not okay. You can't stay behind me. You have to be next to me. And then when they're next to me, I'm going to reward them for that. But I'm going to do the training outside of the specific event that I'm working on, that run, walk, run. So train your dog outside of that, train each dog separately, make sure they understand that they need to be in the heel position no matter what pace that you're going. Then start doing your walk again. If they lag behind you, you have to give them a correction to let them know you're not allowed to drag behind me. You have to be next to me. And that's the way we're going to reinforce the rules. So I hope that helps. I'm going to get a Great Pyrenees puppy this fall, and I was doing research into the breed, and it says that they're neither food nor toy motivated. When I talked to the breeder, she said that motivation is the hardest thing about training them. I've watched all your videos on motivation, but was wondering if you had any specific tips on training dogs that are harder to motivate and get bored easily. This is a great question because not all dogs are going to be motivated. This is why when competitive dog trainers are looking for a dog, they're looking for the dog that loves toys and loves food and will do anything in the world to get the toy that the owner or the trainer has, because then it makes it much easier to train the dog. If you're trying to get a dog to do something and the reward that you have is not valuable enough to the dog, so that's what reward-based training is. Reward-based training is based on how much does the dog want the treat that I am offering them in order for them to do the behavior. And if the dog doesn't want the treat, then it can make it a little bit more difficult. Use mealtime as training time. Don't give your dog any food outside of training time. Make them work for every single bite. Then they're going to be more willing to work for their food. So you get their food out in the morning, you take the bowl, you set it down, and you grab food out of it, and you start training your dog. And you make them work for every single bite. And if they don't want to work, no problem. We'll feed you the rest at dinner time, and you start then. Once they realize the only way they're going to eat is during training, then you can use the food as motivation to get them to perform the behaviors. And if you're having a hard time with that, then I would recommend using leash pressure. The nice thing about leash pressure is we're implementing negative reinforcement. Now, remember, positive and negative punishment, positive and negative reinforcement. Positive means adding to the equation, negative means taking away. Reinforcement means encouraging a behavior to be repeated. Punishment means preventing a behavior from being repeated. Positive reinforcement, we are adding to the equation. We are giving them treats, hoping that they are going to be motivated by the treat to do the behavior. That's positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, again, remember, reinforcement is encouraging a behavior to be repeated. This is going to be our leash pressure. The nice thing about using negative reinforcement or leash pressure is the dog doesn't have a choice. A dog has a choice when you're using food. If you say, hey, will you sit for this piece of food? And the dog goes, nah, I'm not interested in that food. Okay, now what? I need to either get something of higher value to motivate the dog using positive reinforcement, or I say, it doesn't matter whether or not you want this treat, I'm going to make you perform the behavior using leash pressure. So check out my video on how to teach a dog leash pressure. This will speed up the training, it helps develop reliability, it's a very clear way to communicate with our dogs, and it makes sure that they understand that anytime you give them a command, you can make them perform the behavior. There's two very important things that need to take place when you're using leash pressure. Incredibly important. Number one, when the leash pressure is turned on, it cannot be turned off until the dog complies. The moment the dog complies, the pressure must be turned off. And if you do it correctly, you can use leash pressure to teach most obedience behaviors. So that's going to be my suggestion if you're working with a lower motivation dog. And keep the sessions short. I have an 8-year-old Staffy who has separation anxiety. I've watched every YouTube video and I've tried everything, but nothing seems to be working. Any suggestions? If I have a dog that is dealing with separation anxiety, if I don't have the dog crated, then I'm going to start crate training the dog, or I'm going to use a specific room that I want the dog to be in. And there's a reason for this. So when somebody leaves the house normally, when the dog has separation anxiety or they create separation anxiety, is they say, okay, I'm getting ready to leave. I put my dog in the crate. I leave for 8 hours. I come back. The dog's out all day. If I'm ready to leave, I put the dog in the crate. I leave for 8 hours or however long I'm gone. I come back. The dog is going to start to learn that pattern. The dog's going to go, every time you put me in the crate, you leave for 8 hours. So then the dog is placed in the crate and the dog starts to have anxiety and they start to become stressed out. You can also have a dog that has a lot of separation anxiety if they've been to the shelter. So sometimes the experience of the shelter can create separation anxiety. The shelter is a very stressful place for dogs. So that's something to keep in mind if you've rescued your dog from the shelter. It may take longer for your dog to understand the training process, so you have to be patient with it. But what I would do is I would crate train the dog, or again, I would use the room, and I would place them in that location randomly throughout the day. So I place a dog in the crate, maybe I'm making breakfast, then I let the dog out of the crate. I put the dog in the crate, I go take a shower or something, I let the dog out of the crate. I'm gonna put the dog in and out of the crate randomly. I don't want the crate to predict me leaving for an extended period of time. Always think about pattern recognition when you're working with your dog. If you start to do something and your dog starts to recognize the pattern, that could change your dog's behavior for the good or for the bad. So in this situation, if you are just simply leaving and you're not doing certain things to change up that pattern, that action can stress the dog out. So what you'll hear in some situations is they'll say, okay, every time you leave, maybe you grab your keys and you put on your jacket. Well, your dog starts to recognize that. So grab your keys randomly and then put your keys back on the key rack. Put your jacket on, take your jacket off. Leave the house, go to the car, come back inside the house. Start doing the behaviors that you normally do that start to trigger your dog's separation anxiety. So you want your dog to start to realize, oh, just because you're grabbing the keys doesn't mean you're leaving. Just because you're putting me in the crate doesn't mean that you're leaving. Just because you're going out to your car doesn't mean that you're leaving. And then when you randomize it, when you do leave, it's not going to be a big deal. But depending on how bad or how severe the separation anxiety is, can really determine how long it's going to take to fix it. So some cases can take a long time. You're really going to have to be patient with it, and you're going to have to continue to do the training. Can I train 2 puppies together, or do I need to do individual training time for each? Is there a possibility of confusing them about which behavior I'm marking if they don't both do the same thing at the same time? Yes, when it comes to training dogs, if I have 2 dogs, I don't like to train them together when they are learning behaviors. Because you're correct, if you tell the dog sit, or you tell both your dogs to sit, one sits and one doesn't, you say yes to the one that sat, but the other one heard the yes too, and if you're using the same markers on each dog, then it can become even more confusing. So if you taught both dogs yes as the continuation marker, and you taught both dogs free as the terminal marker, the one sits, you say yes, the other one did not sit, the other one's going to think not listening is the correct behavior. And you said yes, and you taught the dog that yes means they're going to get a reward, so you would have to reward both dogs, but only one dog did the correct behavior. So what I do is I train each dog separately. I'm going to train one puppy, then I'm going to train the next puppy, and I'm going to do it so many times that both of them know the commands, and they know it on the verbal command alone, and they're both proficient in all the different behaviors that I would like them to perform. Then I would bring them together and train them together after we've gone through that training process. Now, while I'm working with them, I would probably use leash pressure because I want to make sure that they're able to do the commands whether or not there's a new distraction, such as the other dog is in the room. And I would also use, if I want to train them both together, it would be wise to use different markers for each dog. So one dog you might use good and yes. The other dog you might use and free. Whatever it is, but you want to make sure that you're not confusing them by marking one dog for doing the correct behavior, but then marking the other dog for not listening, or vice versa. So train them separately, bring them together, then train them together after they both already know it. This one is with 2 dogs, Coco, fearful female, 1.5 years, Scout, overweight male, 2 years. The first one is Coco has separation anxiety from Scout. This goes back to any sort of separation anxiety. If they're always together, they're not going to be comfortable being separate. So you have to start separating them, and I would start with small durations. So maybe I would let one dog outside to go to the bathroom, and then I would switch and let the other dog go outside. Or I might have one dog in one room and one dog in the other room. And I'm not going to do it for a long time in the beginning. It's going to be very short durations. And then as the dog becomes better, I will increase the amount of time that they are away from each other. Then I would start taking them on walks separately. You have to get the dog comfortable with doing everything without the other dog being in the picture. Because right now the dog is just so used to seeing the other dog that is a part of everything the dog knows. If I'm here, they're Scout. If I'm here, they're Scout. If I'm outside, Scout. If I'm in the car, they're Scout. You have to start doing things with them separately. Start small and increase the time as they become more comfortable and better at it. Do you keep training treats on you all the time, or do you have dedicated training sessions? Do you use your markers during non-specific training periods? Do you find your newer dogs perform better during training time? A video on how you interact with all your dogs outside of training would be helpful. These are great questions. So do I have training treats on me all the time? No, I don't have training treats on me all the time, but I do use my markers outside of training. People often get confused about the 1 second rule because we have 1 second to influence a dog's behavior. This doesn't mean that our dogs have a 1 second memory. This is why we use the markers. The markers are so important because of this. So if I taught my dog that yes means they're going to get a reward or free means they're released and they're going to get a reward, then I can use that in order to mark specific behaviors, and it's going to give me way more time to get the primary reinforcer to my dog. So if I wasn't using markers and I wanted my dog to know that they did something that I like and I want to reward them, I'd have to reward them within a second of doing that behavior. But if my dog is conditioned to the condition reinforcer, then I have as long as the dog is paying attention to what's going on. So with my dogs, I've had them out and they did something that I liked. I'm implementing the concept of free shaping. Now in the early stages, I would have the treats on me. But my dogs now, they're really well conditioned. They know how I communicate with them and we have a really clear understanding of each other. If they do something that I like and I go free, my dog goes, oh, I just did something that you like. And then I walk towards the kitchen and my dog follows me to the kitchen and I open the freezer. My dog's like, oh, you're opening the freezer. I grab their bag of frozen food. They're like, there's the food. And I hand them some of their frozen dog food as a treat. I made the connection. Even though the reward came way after my dog did the behavior, my dog knows whatever they were doing when they heard me say free is what they're being rewarded for. That is why our markers are so important. So yes, I definitely mark behaviors, but I will go to the kitchen or I will go to wherever their treats are and I will give their treats. And if you see my dog when I do something like this, you'd be like, oh yeah, your dog totally knows what's going on. So it's as long as they're paying attention to what's going on. Now, if I marked a behavior and I was going to reward my dog, let's say my dog is 30 feet away from me. I tell my dog to sit, my dog sits, I go, yes. My dog goes, oh, I did the behavior. And I start to walk towards my dog and my dog is going, oh, here comes a treat. He's bringing the treat, squirrel. And then I reward my dog. I just rewarded my dog for the squirrel. But if my dog's walking towards me and my dog's going, here comes a treat, and I make it to my dog and I give my dog the treat, I made the connection. So it gives us a lot of time. That is why the markers are so powerful. Do I find newer dogs perform better during training time? Absolutely. A new puppy, a dog that's new to the training, they're going to perform better during your training routine. But I often don't give a dog a bunch of formal commands when I'm not training them. I don't start giving a dog formal commands outside of the training sessions until I know that the dog is reliable within the obedience. So I'm training my dog, I'm adding more distractions, my dog is staying on the climb even though I throw a toy past them, my dog comes to me every single time, my dog lays down every time I tell him to down. When they get really good at the obedience, then I will start giving them random commands outside of the obedience training session. But I will do training sessions that simulate a normal day. So one of the exercises I like to do with my dogs is what's known as random sits and downs. I will have my dog out and about. We're not in a training session. I will give my dog a command, down. I will reinforce that command. I will release the dog and reward them. So at any moment, I might give my dog a command. This is going to help them become more aware of what you're doing and what you're saying at any given time. And you're gonna have more reliability in your obedience. But most definitely in the beginning, you're gonna see that your dogs perform better during a training session. But outside of the training session, if you're not willing to reinforce a command, do not give your dog the command, because then you're setting yourself up for failure. Anytime I give a command, I'm ready to reinforce it. A video of how I interact with all my dogs outside of the training, I let them be dogs. I let my dogs be dogs. They come and they go as they please. When it comes to crate training, this is a good way to look at this. I crate train a dog until the dog is potty trained and until the dog is house trained. House trained means my dog knows how to behave inside of the house without doing any behaviors that I don't like. So my dog is no longer chewing on furniture. My dog is no longer trying to get into the trash. My dog is no longer trying to jump on the counter to get food. When I know my dog is house trained, then my dog is no longer having to be crate trained, because crate training is house training and it's potty training. So when my dogs are out, my dogs are house trained, they're potty trained, they do whatever they want. They listen really great. I tell them to come to me, they'll come to me, but I often will use informal commands. I see my dogs, I'm like, hey, and I'm just as excited to see my dogs as they are to see me. So they listen, and I made the obedience training so much fun in the beginning that they just want to listen and they want to hang out and they want to have a good time. So I'm not trying to give them a bunch of formal commands. It's not necessary, but if I need to give them a formal command, so let's say the front door's open, they go out in the front yard, and I say, hey, let's go, guys. They'll usually come running over. And if they don't, then I might give them the formal command so they know that I'm serious, but I've done enough training to where if I do give them a formal command, they're going to listen to me. Okay, hope that helps. My dog has a lazy sit. How do I teach her to sit straight? I'm assuming that the lazy sit means your dog sits and goes on her side. First, you want to make sure that your dog doesn't have any hip problems. So I've trained dogs in the past, they have hip issues, and when they sit, they will not do the straight sit, they will sit on their side. If that's the case, I allow them to sit on their side because they have hip issues. If your dog doesn't have any sort of hip problems and they're completely healthy, then you can use something known as a shaping box. It's a box that doesn't give the dog the opportunity to sit on their side, they have to sit straight. So then you do enough sits and downs in that shaping box to get them conditioned to doing the behavior straight and the way that you would like them to perform it. Some advice on collecting your puppy and transporting them home would be great. If I'm transporting a puppy or a dog in my vehicle, I have them in a crate. And I do that because it's safer for the dog to be transported in a crate than to be loose in the car. Or there's other options where you have a harness on the puppy and that harness buckles into one of the seat belts. You don't want to get into a car accident with a loose dog in the vehicle. It's very dangerous for the dog and it's very dangerous for the human because the dog could start bouncing around the car, which could kill the dog, and they could bounce into you, hit you in your head, and kill you. So if you're transporting a dog in the vehicle, either have them in a crate or buckle them into the seat. That's going to be the safer way to transport a dog inside of your vehicle. In your video, you use a hard bone for puppies. I often use those for older dogs because I hear a lot of trainers say to use teething toys instead, only because they think the bones are too hard for their teeth. Your opinion. A raw bone is great for puppies and it's excellent for dogs, but it's not the bone as much as it is the meat that's on the bone. So if you give your dog a raw bone and the dog eats the meat off the bone and they eat the bone marrow out of the bone, then you want to take the bone away. Even if it's an adult dog. You don't want them to continue grinding their teeth on the bone because they can actually grind down their canines. Even if they're an older dog, they can grind them down. They just start scraping up against that bone and eventually their canines are half the size they used to be. So if you are giving your dog raw bones, make sure you take them away after they consume all the meat, or if you have filled the raw bone with something else, whether it's peanut butter or you took the dog's kibble, you soaked it in water and you stuffed it in the bone and froze it, and now you're giving it to your dog as a way for them to eat their food. Once they eat the kibble out of the bone, then you want to take the bone away. I don't like to give a bone to a dog and just let them grind their teeth on it. Again, that's not good if they're a puppy or an adult dog. I have a short question, and I remember you saying that you feed your dogs a raw diet. Can you explain more about how you use kibble in training, or do you start with kibble and switch to raw at some point? I guess mealtime with a raw diet is a very high reward, and so what would you use for treats or training in that situation? Anytime I'm training a dog, I don't give them training treats, meaning I don't buy the store-bought treats that are filled with sugar and they're not healthy for our dogs in the treat section at the pet store. I give my dogs either freeze-dried dog food is what I will mostly use for training treats, or I use keto dog food by Visionary Pet for their training treats, because that could also be their meal. So it's very healthy and most dogs love it. And then when my dogs are done with the main portion of the obedience training, then I will give them the full raw dog food. And if I am training them, I will use the freeze-dried dog food. I'm just curious if you can elaborate a little bit on why we are using free instead of yes during retrieval training. Okay, so during my retrieval training video, when Harley would bite the wooden dowel, she would bite the dowel and I would say free. Remember, free for my dogs when I'm training them is a terminal marker. A terminal marker is letting a dog know they are correct and they are done with that behavior. You are pinpointing a moment in time when the dog is correct. So I want the dog to know that biting the dowel is what I'm trying to get my dog to do. So once my dog bites the dowel, I say free, pinpointing that behavior that I was asking the dog to perform, releasing the dog from the behavior so they can now open their mouth, and then giving them a treat so that they can now take it because they no longer have the dowel in their mouth. If I told my dog out instead, my dog would release the item, and then if I said free after my dog released the item, at that point now I'm rewarding the act of letting go of the dowel instead of holding it. When we're teaching a retrieve, we want our dog to hold on to the item. So when I want to tell my dog, that's a great job, you did exactly the way that I liked, I have two options. I can use verbal praise while they're holding the item. Yay, good dog, keep it up, nice job, really good, that's what I like to see. Or I use the terminal marker to say, that's the correct behavior, I'm going to reward you, and you're done doing that behavior, so you may drop the item and get your reward. That's why I use the terminal marker free when I'm first teaching a dog retrieval training. I made the mistake of teaching my dog to stay quiet and not bark. Now I would like her to bark, but she doesn't. How can I teach her to bark? Teaching a dog to bark is pretty simple. There's two common techniques that I use to teach a dog to bark. Number one, I knock on the wall. So I knock on the wall, the dog hears it, they bark, I go, yes, I reward the dog. I knock on the wall, they hear it, they bark, yes, reward. The other option, I put the dog on a harness, I put him on a back tie, then I tease him with a toy. The moment they bark for the toy, I go, yes, and I give them the toy. Or I say free, and I give them the toy. And then I allow them to play with the toy. Once I know I can get the dog to bark, whether it's knocking on the wall or teasing them with the toy, then I would put the name to it. So I would say speak, or whatever I want the command to be. Speak, knock, knock, bark, bark, yes, reward. Speak, I knock, the dog barks, yes, reward. Speak, I bring the toy out, I tease the dog, they bark, I reward. Speak, I bring the toy out, the dog barks, I reward. On a long enough timeline, it becomes a predictable pattern. So I say speak, the dog starts to speak before I knocked on the wall. Or I say speak, the dog starts to speak before I pull out the toy. So now we have it on a verbal command, and whenever you want your dog to bark, so let's say you want your dog to bark when people come over, somebody comes over, you go speak, your dog barks, you reward them. Now your dog is going to start associating when people come over, you're going to ask me to speak or to bark, so I'll bark when people come over. And that's how you teach them to bark. What's the difference between place and climb? The way that I teach place and climb, people have different names for different commands, but place for me, I want my dogs to place their paws on a bowl that I placed upside down. So place means put your two front paws on it. This is so I get them to start understanding how to pivot around their rear end. So it gives them rear end awareness, and it helps teach them the heel command, because you can use the bowl and you can have the dog's front paws on the bowl and you can have them spin their back end around into heel position. It also is used for a target. So if you're teaching your dog to jump and you would like your dog to go to a specific target, you can have them jump, run over to the place, they put their paws on it, then you can have them jump back over, and it can teach them a specific position if you're doing some sort of jumping routine that they do in different obedience or competition obedience routines. And place, or climb rather, is an elevated position that I would like the dog to go to, and they have to maintain that position until I use a release word. So for me is break, I use a terminal marker, for me is free, or I give them a new command. So that's going to be the difference between the two. Most trainers that I know use command and cue interchangeably. What are you calling the cue starts as a lure or something and turns into a hand signal? Could you clarify this for me, please? The cue is what I'm using to get the dog to do the behavior when I'm teaching them something. So if I am using food and I lift up on the food, the dog's nose goes up, their butt goes down. That is a physical cue to get the dog to sit. If I take the leash and I lift up, applying leash pressure, and that gets the dog to sit, that's another physical cue that is getting the dog to perform the behavior. For me, the command is what precedes the physical cue. So if I'm using a verbal command, so if I said sit and then I lifted up on the leash, now the sit is the command, the physical cue is going to be the leash pressure. Physical command can also come before a physical cue. For example, if you're doing AKC, competitive obedience, you have to teach your dog hand signals to perform different behaviors. So for example, raising your hand in the air is the command for a down. So you raise your hand in the air and your dog needs to lay down. Well, that now is the command, and the command always precedes the cue. So I raise my hand, then I lure my dog into the down. So I'm using the physical cue to have the dog go into the down, but now the command is me raising my hand. That's the easiest way to remember it. That's how I look at it. The command always precedes the physical cue. The physical cue is what gets the dog to do the behavior. The command is what is telling the dog they have to do the behavior. So whether that is a physical command, such as raising your hand as the example for the AKC obedience, or saying a verbal command. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And as always, if you can, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you want to go above and beyond and support the channel, there will also be a link to my Patreon account. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you in my next video.